It's the Daily Countable, what your government's doing and what you can do about it. I'm Andrea Seabrook. Today is Wednesday, January 9th, 2019. Shuttle diplomacy. That's the phrase of the day in Washington. President Trump is heading up to the Capitol at lunchtime to meet with Senate Republicans, some of whom are feeling a little queasy about keeping large parts of the government shut down. Democratic leaders from both chambers are gathering with union reps and federal workers, some 800,000 of whom are about to miss their first paycheck. After then, they'll all troop back down Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House, where they'll try, again, to reach some sort of agreement. Last night on live TV, though, neither side sounded anywhere near ready to compromise.
The federal government remains shut down for one reason, and one reason only, because Democrats will not fund border security.
The President of the United States, having failed to get Mexico to pay for his ineffective, unnecessary border wall, and unable to convince the Congress or the American people to foot the bill, has shut down the government.
Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer there. Now, let's set aside the your fault, no, your fault session for a moment and talk about President Trump's case in favor of a border wall. And I mean his actual argument, his rhetorical logic. For example, here's a little clip about drugs from last night's speech. Listen to the flow of his argument here.
Our southern border is a pipeline for vast quantities of illegal drugs, including meth, heroin, cocaine, and fentanyl. Every week, 300 of our citizens are killed by heroin alone, 90% of which floods across from our southern border. More Americans will die from drugs this year than were killed in the entire Vietnam War.
Now let's break that down for a second. It goes like this. 1, lots of drugs come across the southern border. 2, that includes 90% of the heroin that comes into the U.S. 3, hundreds of Americans are killed by heroin. And 4, tens of thousands of Americans will die from drug abuse this year. All of these statements are true. They're facts. They're just missing a few important details. For example, the vast majority of that heroin trafficking comes through legal points of entry, hidden in cars and trucks. A wall's not going to stop that. As for crystal meth, one of the biggest producers is Indiana, with Ohio, Tennessee, Illinois, and other states in the region making up the so-called meth belt. We going to build a wall around the Midwest? And about those tens of thousands of drug-related deaths every year, a huge portion of those are overdoses of legal drugs prescribed by doctors and then stolen or bought from family and friends. Not only are these facts conveniently omitted, but the actual logic of Trump's argument doesn't work. The statements don't actually follow one another, leading to any kind of causal conclusion. It's like saying, windmills turn when there's lots of wind. We want it to be less windy. So let's get rid of all the windmills. It's a logical fallacy. Lots of drugs come through Mexico. Americans are dying because of drugs. Therefore, we need a wall. Of course, my favorite example of logical fallacy comes from a different source. Sesame Street, Bert and Ernie. It's the one where Bert walks in and sees Ernie holding a banana in his ear.
No, Ernie, why is that banana still in your ear?
Listen, Bert, I use this banana to keep the alligators away.
Alligators? Ernie, there are no alligators on Sesame Street.
Right. It's doing a good job, isn't it, Bert?
It's important to listen for these kinds of statements, no matter where you stand on the issues. That is, if we want to make rational decisions about what our government should do. What do you think? Come to Countable and tell us. Better yet, hold your representatives accountable for their arguments. And hey, if you like this podcast, subscribe and catch up at Countable, what your government's doing and what you can do about it. I'm Andrea Seabrook. Talk tomorrow.